Alright, hi everyone. Welcome to a video on middlewares but in Next.js. We have already covered middlewares many times now, especially in Express. So we'll do a quick refresher of what are middlewares. Then we'll understand how do you introduce middlewares in Next.js. Why are they useful? Then we look at some code, some more code, and then understanding how you selectively run middlewares in Next.js. The way to do middlewares in Next.js is super weird, which is the reason that you don't use them very often in Next. I think this will improve over time, but right now it's a little messed up how you do middlewares in Next.js. Thankfully, the biggest use case of middlewares is actually just authentication, which Next.auth takes care of, and you don't have to worry about writing authentication middlewares, thankfully. But yeah, you'll see throughout these slides, the way to do middlewares in Next.js is a little immature, I would say, and I think it'll get better over time. With that context, let's get right into it. What are middlewares? A quick refresher. Middlewares are code that runs before or after your request handler. The request handler is the final code that runs, that handles your request. If you're running some code before or after it, you can do that in middlewares. It is commonly used for things like analytics. We'll see that example over here. But if you want to track how many people are hitting your servers, middlewares are usually the right place to put that logic. Authentication, we have seen this many times. We'll also be seeing this when we reach this second part right here. And lastly, a lot of times you want to redirect the user from one page to another. And it makes sense to do that in middlewares for Next.js. Doesn't really make sense to do that for Express, what we're discussing in the first slide. But in Next.js, middleware redirects are a very popular use case. With that context, let's get right into it. Let's look at the first code. This is some very basic Express code. And what does it do? It says import the Express library, initialize the HTTP server. It maintains a request count variable, initializes it to 0, and then we add a app.use function, which basically means this will be our middleware. You can also extract this function out and pass just the function name over here. Either way, what this app.use is doing is adding something to request plus plus. It's increasing the value of request count by 1 and then calling next. If you remember, what does this do? This logic will make sure that anytime a person sends a request either here or here, there are two endpoints that I've exposed. A get endpoint that just sends back the user hello world, and another endpoint that sends back the user this global request count variable. Anytime either of these are hit, first the control will reach the middleware. We will do a request count plus plus, and then we will call next, which will basically take the control to the respective request handler. That's what I wrote, right? What was the definition of a middleware? Middleware is code that runs before your request handler. And that's exactly what happens here. This line of code runs before the exact request handler. Let's try to look at this code really quickly. This code has been sort of put it here in a copyable sort of code thingy. Let me quickly open a terminal and add a new project here. Call it week. I don't even remember. Are we at 19 now? Very close to 19. Offline 1. npm init-y, npx tsc-init. Open it in Visual Studio Code. I'm assuming these are like very straightforward steps now. I open an empty project in Visual Studio Code. I will go to tsconfig and change the root dir to be what? /source. Change the out dir to be what? /dist. And I will create a folder called src, inside which I will add index.ts, where I'm going to paste all of the code. So let me move this to the right. Let me move the browser to the left. Let me copy this code and paste it over here. I also need to install the dependencies. So npm install express and add types /express. Now, if you look at it, the code is the same. Let's see, is this logic running? I have said app.use function middleware. I can also do this if this sounds jarring. The reason I did not do this is because, you have to put some good types over here, which are very hard to find from Express. You can find them easily. But, if you put the code directly over here, the types are inferred, and hence I don't see, a type error here. But if I pull it out as a function, I have to explicitly give it types here. Otherwise it will complain that, this has a implicit any type. So you can do this, just give it any types explicitly or find the real type, doesn't matter. Either way, this code probably is a little more easy to digest. Okay, I have written a middleware function and I'm calling app.use middleware. This line, what does app.use do? It makes sure that this middleware will run before any of the following calls, which is why if I run tsc-b to compile my code and then node disk/index.js, and if I go to localhost :3000 in my browser, you will see I do get back hello world. So this endpoint is working correctly. Request count is increasing and then the endpoint is running. Let me run that a few times. Now let me go to the /request count endpoint and it says 17, 18, 19. It's increasing. Why is it increasing by 2? I'm sure there's a reason. I'll look at it later. I would have assumed it will increase by 1, but it is increasing by 2. Can you guess why? I don't know why. Live debugging. Let me restart. 1, 3. If I refresh this once, the middleware gets called twice. Oh, I know. Do you know? I know the answer. But do you know the answer? Okay, why is it if I'm refreshing the page, request is going up by 2 and not 1? The answer is the browser by default sends another request. If I refresh this, you will see there's a request that goes to the original thing. There is another request that goes to the /favicon.iso. There's nothing over there. Like there's no favicon that I have on this website. Favicon basically means, the thing that you see over here, the thing that you see over here. The browser by default, whenever you visit something, hits favicon.ico. It's sending this request and the control is reaching the middleware for that second request. And then of course there is no handler, which is why, there is a 404 over here. But that's why the request count is going up by 2. If you want to fix this, you can, either try this request via Postman. So if I send the same request in Postman, then it will work. It'll just go up by 1. Or, you can ignore if request dot, whatever. Yeah, there you go. URL equal to /favicon.ico. Only then do the request count ++, but you get the idea. This is what middlewares can be used for. Why did we use this middleware? For authentication. What were the other use cases of middlewares? This not authentication. This was for analytics, making sure you can track how many requests are coming. What else can you use it for? You can use it for authentication. For example, if you look at this code, we have written this auth middleware many times. Okay, bhai, import Express from Express, import JWT from JSON Web Tokens, initialize the Express server, and then on any protected route of yours, pass in the middleware. And what does the middleware do? It extracts the user's authorization header. It checks that this user's token is valid. If it is valid, then it calls next and the control does reach here. If it is invalid, then you send back a 401 status code to the end user. This is a very commonly used middleware we have discussed many times in week 4, week 5. So I'm not going to go through and try this out locally. If you've built any project like the Paytm project the first time we built it, or many projects like To-Do project that we've built, you've used middlewares in Express, and this is how they work. The question is, middlewares in Next.js, how can I write a function that runs before or after your request handler? Let's see how to do that in Next.js. Very nice doc if you want to try it out yourself. Middleware, then based on, okay, this is just the official definition that you'll see here as well. Middlewares allow you to run code before a request is completed. Then based on the incoming request, you can modify the response by rewriting change the response itself. Redirecting the user becomes very important in Next.js, is not really important in Express, because in Express, the backend requests are going from here, and there's no point of a redirect on a backend request. If I'm sending a bunch of backend requests here, I can't really redirect the person's page by using backend requests, but you can do that in Next.js, because even the front end request is being handled by Next.js. If you did not understand this part, it's fine, but that's what redirecting means here. We will eventually see this in action as well very soon. Modifying the request or response headers, or modifying the complete response directly. That's what middlewares let you do. And use cases, again, there is a very long list of use cases here. The ones that we'll probably discuss today, we won't even discuss authentication. We'll do a very simple analytics and logging. But if you want to build something like NextAuth yourself, then you will need to understand middlewares, and most probably the code that you will write will look something like this. So if you go to the doc that's mentioned here at the top, and if you scroll down a bit, you will reach a section that shows you how can you manually set cookies. If you were not using NextAuth, we have used NextAuth now for authentication, but if we were not using NextAuth, then this was the way to go to actually, set the cookies and do authentication. Cool. That's a brief of middlewares in Next. Let's look at some code. Let's initialize an empty React app. My project will be called week 19 offline 2. Going to just select the defaults and open this in Visual Studio Code. Going to wait for npm install to finish. Open that on the right, open this on the left. There you go. npm install finished. Next up, let me do a npm run dev. Make sure we have something running over here. So if I run npm run dev and open localhost colon 3000, I see the standard Vercel boilerplate frontend. All of this code resides where? In app/page.tsx. In app/page.tsx right here. If I change all of this to, whatever, hi there, then hi there is what I see over here as well. Given that we have this, let's create a middleware.ts in the root folder. Now the thing about Next.js is the reason I said it's very weird the way they do middlewares is because they expect you to have a single file. I repeat, they expect you to have a single file in your root folder called middleware.ts, where they expect you to put all of your code. Now they mention on their website that while only one middleware.ts file is supported per project, you can still organize your middleware logic modularly, which means you can still, put your code in various files, but there will just be one global middleware.ts file that will eventually export everything. So the reason this is different from Express, excuse me, the reason this is a little weird is because most projects won't really restrict you. Most frameworks, React or Express never says that you will only create a single folder or single file called middleware.ts where you will put all of your code. But these guys do. They say, bro, all the middleware logic will be extracted from here. If you want to write it modularly, you create other files, whatever middleware 1.ts, and then whatever is being exported from here, you can just import here. So that's what they sort of suggest, but we won't do any of that. We'll just have a single global root middleware.ts, this file right here. But yeah, that's one of many reasons why middlewares are very weird in Next.js, or at least Next 13. Add code to track the number of requests. So the way middlewares work is you create this root file, and here you export a function called middleware, where you get the request object, which I think is next request, here you can sort of, write all the logic you want to write before any of your endpoints is hit. I repeat, before any of your front-end endpoints, or if you have a back-end endpoint, let's say API/user/route.ts, export function get return next response.json message, you are logged in. So your backend request or your front end request, irrespective of where the request is coming, this middleware will run, and here you can put whatever logic you want. So in my case, let's say I want to create a let request count equal to 0 and then do a request count ++ over here. Now in the real world, you would put this in a database and you won't be storing it in memory. We're just showing how you can do analytics. Of course, real world analytics are done a different way. Given this, how do you call next is the next question. How do you call next? Where do you tell कि भाई next function should run? And the answer is you can call it by doing next request dot next or next response dot next. You can get the response from here and return this final response to the end user. So what are we doing? We are running some logic before the actual handler. We can of course run some logic after the actual handler as well. And that is the exact definition of a middleware, right? It lets you run some logic before your main logic and then run some logic after it as well. That's what middlewares let you do. Let's see if this actually does what it says though. Let's put a log after it. Console.log request count is this much. If I go back here and refresh, you will see request count is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are a lot of requests coming. If I open this, there are requests to, JS files as well and a bunch of other files, which is why, it's going up by a lot. We will see how you can restrict that. But right now, as you can see, even if I go to a front end page, request count goes up, which means the middleware gets called. And even if I go to a backend page, API/user, and then press enter, refresh. As you can see, as I refresh this, request count goes up. Harkirat, where have you done app.use middleware? Excuse me. We're not using Express. You don't have to do app.use anything. We are using Next.js. Next.js does file-based routing. So it understands all of your files, including it understands that you have a global middleware.ts where you've put some logic. So that's how you do very basic middlewares in Next.js. Now, what is the problem in this? The biggest problem is it runs on all routes. I might want I only want the middleware to run on, some API routes. I want this middleware to run only on, /API/user routes. So if you want to restrict where the middleware runs, is when, Next.js becomes even weirder. Let's see how you can run or restrict this logic to run on certain endpoints. This one just shows how you can, run the same thing on a backend route as well. So create a API/user/route.ts that we've created already in my Visual Studio Code, API user route.ts, and then a middleware logic over here. Lastly, selectively running middlewares. How can you say, okay, I only run this logic for these endpoints? And this is where it gets very weird. As you can see, it doesn't give you a very easy way to restrict this function will run on a certain middleware. There is one thing you can do. You can export a config over here, which I don't remember the exact thing that you need to export. Let's see. Where was the reference code? There you go. Yeah, you can export a const called config, where you can say, if it matches this pattern, only then the middleware should run. So you can do some selective middleware running. Okay, this middleware only runs when a request comes to, let's say, /API/any path star, which means doesn't matter what comes after API. If an API endpoint is being called, then the middleware should run. If a front end route is being called, then the middleware should not run. That is what this matcher lets you match on. So now if I save this and open it in Google Chrome, you will see request count goes up if I go to the backend route, does not go up if I go to the front end route. So you can do some filtering, but you can only put one thing here. What if you want some logic to run on /API/user/star, and then another logic to run on /page/a.html, whatever. So you might want to run logic selectively, and this matcher logic isn't the best. It'll help you do some filtering, but not a lot. So if you really want to do filtering, the way you do that is like this, which is, a little weird if you'll ask me. But yeah, you just extract the current path name. You do a request.nextURL.path name, and then you do all your checks. Okay, if the path starts with /admin, then maybe I should do something like this. I should redirect the user somewhere. If it starts with something like dashboard, then I should actually run the logic, so on and so forth. So you selectively run logic by writing a bunch of if statements. Harkirat, that looks very weird. Yes, that is very weird. But that's how things are, unfortunately, in Next right now. I'm sure they will make changes and, make it cleaner. But right now, if you want to use middlewares for, either doing something before a request is called, console.log or whatever, request count ++, or doing something after request is called, or redirecting a user to some other page. For example, if someone comes to your /admin page, you might want to send them to, a /signin page. You're trying to log in, you don't have access. Let's say, if the user is coming to /admin, you do some checks over here. If request dot whatever, user dot is Harkirat, or whatever your admin checking logic is, if that is not true, if this is not true, then you can send the user back to the /signin page. Okay, bhai, first login, and only if you are Harkirat or someone specific will we let you access the specific resource. Let's see if that works though. Let's see if the user is getting redirected when they go to the /admin page, and when they go to the /dashboard page, then nothing should happen. They should still reach the final dashboard page. You open this on the right, let me go to localhost:3000 /admin, and you will see it takes me to the /signin page. Now there is no sign-in page over here, which is why you see a 404. But if there was a sign-in page, sign-in /page.tsx, export default function, return div sign-in page. If I save this, if I refresh, even though I'm trying to go to the /admin page, I am being redirected to the /signin page. A lot of people asked this during the Paytm project, when we were doing the Paytm project in Express. People were like, Harkirat, how can I protect routes? How can I, if someone is trying to access the /admin route and they are not logged in, how do I take them to /signin? That's a little hard to do in React. Not hard to do, it's just, we'll get to this when we go to the next video, which is going to be on client-side rendering and server-side rendering. But basically what happens in a React application is, okay, if you hit a /admin endpoint, you still get back the front end for the /admin endpoint. And then somewhere in your JavaScript logic, do you actually redirect the user to, whatever /signin. So for 1 minute millisecond, you still get back the admin page. Harkirat, that's a security vulnerability. You get back the admin page. You just get the UI of it. You get, maybe if the admin page has, an input box over here, an input box over here, and some button over here, you get that UI for a flash of a second, and then you can just redirect the user to /signin. You can also write client-side logic so that the user never sees this. But the first request that goes out to /admin will return the user an index.html. In that index.html, there might be an index.js which redirects the user, but the first request will get back an HTML. Versus in Next.js, our very first request, if I go to /admin, and if I open the network tab, you will see if I go to /admin, the very first request gets back a 307 status code. It says 307 temporary redirect. The first request itself redirects the user. Versus if you try the same thing in a React application, the very first request won't redirect the user. The very first request will return them some HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. JavaScript will run. It will probably hit some backend endpoint. Check if is the user logged in. If the user is not logged in, then it will refresh the user. So that's where, server side rendering, client side rendering comes into the picture. But we'll understand that in the next video. What have we learned in this video? How to do global middlewares in Next, because that's the only way you can do middlewares. If you look at the middlewares.ts file of app.100xdevs.com, you will see here we have put the logic. If the user is trying to access a page that starts with /courses, so if the person goes to app.100xdevs.com /courses/3 or something like that, we ignore what this is. We get their token, some token we get. If the token doesn't exist, we redirect the user. If the token does exist, we still check, is this the most latest token? And if that's not the case, we also redirect the user again to invalid session. Hakiyat, I don't understand this. Yeah, you don't need to, but I'll tell you where this is used. This is used in to make sure two people are not logged in at the same time. If I'm already logged in here with an ID, if I go to Brave now, and if I log in with the same ID, I don't know how I'm logged in here. Let me log in both of them. So I am logged in my Brave browser, and I can, freely visit the course. Now let's say I share my credentials with a friend of mine and they log in here in their Chrome browser. Now this Chrome browser session is the most active session. This person has access to the course. The original person, the Brave browser person, if I now go to any page, you will see it says I went to /invalid session and then that redirected to /signin. But the logic that ran, that took me to /invalid session is right here. Okay. Yeah, the user has a token, but if this is not their latest token, if someone else has overridden their token, then you redirect them to /invalid session. That is where we use middlewares currently in app.100xdevs.com. As you can see, it's not a lot of logic because, you don't want to put a lot of logic in a single file, which is, a very weird pattern that they have. Thankfully, authentication is taken care of by NextAuth, so you don't ever worry about, middlewares in Next, if I'm being honest. That's all for this one. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.